So, hello everyone, welcome to the panel, Global Perspectives on Network Fees and Net Neutrality. I really enjoyed this panel because we have been talking about these for some years now. So I'll make a short introduction. We have 5 speakers. Each one will have a slot of 1 minute to present himself, 12 minutes to address the topic, and then we open for questions and comments from the audience, online and on-site. So if you're unaware of network fees are, some will call them fair share, some will call them internet tools, so some will support, some will not support. The idea is that the price, the cost that you use for connectivity can or cannot vary according to the telco decision and the service provider. This has been a topic for consultation in Europe, in Brazil, in South Korea, in US and other places. And in some countries they have experienced the network fees impact, like South Korea. We did a campaign that we call it the tool, internet tool. And we gave 10 reasons why we believe it's against the best for the internet. So there you have your issues of consumer rights, you'll have issues of data costs and others. It's of particular interest, the report from BEREC, that will say that the cost for data has been decreasing the past years, which does not justify the introductions of new fee system. That said, telcos will support that they need more proportional contribution to the networks. Governments will say that they need more investments for connecting the unconnected, and is a topic of different size and contradictions. So I'll give here the floor, 1 minute for each one to introduce. So K.S. Park. K.S. Park is Professor of Law at Korea University Law School and Director of OpenNet. Welcome.
Yes, I don't think at IGF, especially at IGF, we should not be afraid of talking about not just the economic significance of net neutrality or other norms, practices by which we have financed the data delivery around the world to make the internet possible. I'll get into that, and I'll talk about how even a small departure from that golden rule, the golden practice, will cause disasters on the internet ecosystem as seen in South Korea.
Thank you, K.S. We move now to Konstantinos Komatis, Resident Fellow with the Atlantic Council Democracy and Tech Initiative.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So glad to see so many of you here interested in this topic. As Fabro said, my name is Konstantinos Komaitis. I am a resident senior fellow with the Democracy and Tech Initiative at the Atlantic Council. I have spent pretty much 20 years discussing this issue, so I can't believe that we're still discussing this issue, frankly. I was in Dubai when this was a thing in 2012. Then I was part of the conversations in Brussels when the open internet regulation was being discussed in 2015. And then since 2021, I believe, if I remember correctly, we have been discussing it again in Europe, and I have been engaging in those conversations as well, and also in some conversations that are happening in Brazil. So very much looking forward to this.
Thank you, Konstantinos. So we move now online to Claudia Ximena Bustamante. She's Executive Director, Commissioner of the Communications Regulatory Commission, CRC, of the Government of Colombia. Welcome, Claudia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me in this space. I'm Claudia Ximena Bustamante, Executive Director and Commissioner of the Communications Regulatory Commission of Colombia. We have been studying this topic since last year and working on net neutrality more than a decade. It would be a pleasure to discuss with all the panelists today.
Thank you, Claudia. So now we move to Tatiana Tropinem from Internet Society.
Thank you very much for having me here. Tatiana Tropina, Internet Society. And at the Internet Society, we have been engaged with this debate very closely because various proposals, not only on network fees, I will speak later about how this debate has been shifting, taking different directions and different angles, but how ultimately there is no indication that there is any problem that actually needs to be solved. In fact, all these proposals on network fees are more solutions in search for a problem and how they ultimately can fragment the internet, disadvantage consumers, and have quite a detrimental impact on net neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. And now we move to Thomas Wollner, Head of Global Content Delivery Policy at Netflix.
Yeah, thank you, Fabro. And hi, everyone. It's great to have such a nice attendance early in the day. Hopefully, if we put on a good show, more people will also walk into the room. So thank you all for making it. So I'm Thomas Wollner. I represent Netflix today and the so-called private sector. But you know, it's been 20 years in this great community of IGF. We're all part of this multi-stakeholder process, and you know, from event to event, sometimes we represent different organizations, and so I think I'll bring that perspective also as a practitioner of IP interconnection. I've been doing this for 15 years on the telecom side, and then on the hyperscale, on our content side, and yeah, I look forward to a great discussion. I'm a little bit intimidated because I see Professor Park has prepared a slide deck, so yeah, I'll just talk through the issue.
Park always have good decks. We should all be intimidated. So I think there is a higher issue here. So we have been discussing network fees for a few years, but directly related to that is how do we govern, how do we regulate the internet? So in the past, we make distinctions between how we serve the internet and how we use the internet, two layers of the internet that we keep separate, at least in terms of regulation. In Brazil, for example, the telecom agency, it's allowed to rule the infrastructures of the internet, but not the application layers. In other countries, this happens as well, in EU and others, and this has been questioned. And this is directly related to the idea of network fees, so it's very good to discuss this, because beyond the idea of network fees per se, there is a discussion here on how we regulate the internet and how many people, how many agencies we have involved in that. So, KS, would you like to start?
Yes. That's me. That's my contact information in case you want to take it down. So I'm a professor at the school and also directing OpenNet digital rights organization that have been fighting for various golden digital norms, including net neutrality. Now, you all know that the sender pay rule that was proposed by telcos at ITU 2012 was roundly rejected by all stakeholders. And you already know why they were rejected, because there is this canonical relationship between net neutrality and information revolution. Under the net neutrality regime, where traffic is not discriminated for content, device, application, or whether the traffic was paid for. Under that regime, everyone has a chance to spread his or her message to everyone else without having to worry about the cost of data delivery. You can just put up one video revealing, say, police brutality, and 1 billion people can watch it, but no cost to you. So the photo that you see is the statue of democracy fighters who worked around the time of Gwangju massacre of 1980, which was a really important event in the history of modern history of Korea. They are risking their lives in printing leaflets, asking people to come out for demonstration, and passing those leaflets out, they'll have to risk their lives. Otherwise, risk of being caught by the police and being tortured. In these days, the protest organizers, they don't have to go through this risk. They can just put on one video, one message, and people will come out. And that's how you see the massive demonstrations in South Korea this past few decades. Fight for net neutrality is not just to fight to continue information revolution, but also not to regress back to the world of telephony or postage, where the sender, whoever is speaking, has to pay the cost of delivering their messages. The sender pay rule exactly undercuts this pro-democratic effect of the internet by taxing people for speaking online. Now, networking, so the internet was built on this idea that we can all crowdsource our connections with one another for free. Just like people lined up to put out a file in a village, all the routers, as long as they stick to the rule of taking from their immediate neighbor and then giving to the other neighbor without any condition and without any payment, everyone can use the communication system without having to pay for delivery. As long as everyone pays for connection, as long as everyone pays for local connection, no one has to pay for the global delivery of data, no matter where you are. And sender pay rule undercuts that. So we have had this system where everybody is paying for local connection, but really don't have to pay anything for actual delivery of the data. Now, network fee proposal, which was revived a few years ago, is something different. It seems to apply only to the cross-border data traffic. It has nationalistic character to it. So what telcos are saying is that they're spending money to maintain the domestic network. So whoever is sending data into the network, thereby burdening the domestic network, needs to pay the telcos who are maintaining it. But what telcos are forgetting is that the traffic route of any internet communication has the overseas segment and the domestic segment, right? Who is paying for the overseas segment? Big techs are investing in subsea cables and content delivery networks. Now, telcos, they can charge their customers the monthly fees exactly because their customers can receive the data from overseas big techs delivered through these subsea cables and CDNs. So telcos are benefiting from the big techs' overseas infrastructure as much as the big techs are benefiting from the domestic infra. So it is this mutual beneficial relationship. So internet communication has this beneficial relationship, and that's why the early internet framers, the early framers of the internet, decided not to charge one another, and that decision really made the information revolution possible. Actually, telcos already know this because telcos, when they receive the traffic through the hierarchical, the normal hierarchy, before the big techs began delivering the traffic at their doorstep through subsea cables, they actually paid money to the higher tier telcos. But now, by receiving traffic directly from the big techs, they are actually saving money, right? Again, a mutually beneficial relationship. Now, you know that under this, you already know that when there is this mutual benefit, usually peering takes place on settlement-free basis. Now, net neutrality does not require peering to be settlement-free. Peering can be paid for. And net neutrality does allow that. But the problem with the network fee law the fair share deal or network fee law in other countries, is that it mandates paid peering. Think about it. If the law requires one party to pay and the other party to get paid, what do you think will happen in that relationship? There will be abuse. The party entitled to payment will abuse the relationship to charge as much possible as much as possible, and the other side will have to succumb to whatever the demand is because why? Because they have legal obligation to make the payment. Now, how do I know this? You don't need a thought experiment to do this because the real experiment happened in South Korea in 2016. You'll see that even small departure from this mutual beneficence principle causes a huge problem. So in South Korea in 2016, the government instituted a partial sender pay rule. So under this rule, only among the telcos, only among the ISPs, the sender had to pay. What happened? Telcos, you can see the image, you can see the picture above. The telcos hosting popular contents like Facebook cache server or Naver, Korea's #1 platform, by definition, because they were popular to all the users of the internet, they became the net sender of the traffic, and they had to pay other telcos, which means hosting popular content became a burden for the telcos. So the competition among the ISPs to host popular contents disappeared. And because the competition disappeared, Korea became the only country that the transit prices, which is really the internet access fees on the supply side or data supply side, did not fall, unlike all other countries where the transit prices fell by at least 5 to 10% each year. Already in 2017, you can see that Korea's transit prices is 8.3 times Paris, 6.2 times London, 4 or 5 times New York and LA. And this trend continues to 2021 when the Korea prices became 8 times London and 10 times Frankfurt. And this, of course, makes the network environment toxic for Korean content providers, which explains why you don't see successful startups from Korea after Naver and Kakao. Even public interest apps like COVID-19 contact tracing apps, the operators complain to the media that network fees are restricting their ability to meet the demand. Many Korean content providers ended up leaving Korea to avoid exorbitant access fees, and this affects the foreign content providers as well. It has exerted upward pressure on the paid peering fees that Korean ISPs charged on foreign content providers. So Twitch, the premier game platform, game video platform, pulled out of Korea 2022, citing, quote unquote, network fees 10 times more expensive than other countries. 10 times Frankfurt, you see it? Mm-hmm. And when this happens, you'll think that, oh, okay, Naver has the domestic platform. Naver has a game platform, so they should welcome this. So because now one competitor is eliminated. No, Naver also opposes this this law because they know that if this law is accepted, it will consolidate the system where the content providers always have to pay to send traffic. And Cloudflare gave up serving Korea content from Korea. Instead they are serving it from Hong Kong or Tokyo, making Korea the market with the most latency among OECD countries. Now, probably there is a nagging argument that still we should do something about big techs because their traffic account for like 40% of entire traffic volume. But the argument is really unfounded and almost childish. I mean, if NVIDIA chips cover 90% of AI chips market, does NVIDIA have to pay something back to the customers, right? We have to think about the cost, right? Whether the traffic actually increases the cost of network maintenance. Now, okay, well, does traffic really cause congestion? No. I mean, you see on the left side, if ISP provides a 50 Mbps, then it can be distributed to 5 houses. But if the ISP provides only 30 Mbps, it will cause problems for all the households. Now, what's going to happen? This means that no matter how much each household, no matter how much a single household tries to use data, it cannot use more because the pipeline is already fixed for each household. The real responsibility for removing congestion comes from ISP who are laying the regional line, whether it will be 50 Mbps or 30 Mbps, whether it's enough to supply all the households. Now,
I like that even the dog is upset in the right-hand side. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm almost done. So this is the graph showing how over the 5 years or the 4 years of the pandemic, the traffic increased 5 times, and yet the green bars representing not just network maintenance cost, but also CAPEX, capital cost, has remained the same over the years. So I'll stop there, and then I'll answer any question you may have.
Thank you, KS. And the discussion is particularly important now. I welcome you to see either in the ISOC report or KS publications the graph on the first days of implementation of the network fees in Korea. You see a spike of internet flowing outside of Korea to come back to Korea. In the current state where we need kind of AI fabrics, we need data centers, we must remember that this kind of data flow is the Milky Way, is the basis of how we fund data centers. If we make data be processed elsewhere, our data centers will become less cheap to process our own data. So I move now to Constantino.
Thank you, Fabro. So it's a very hard task to follow KS because she has been literally doing this for such a long time, and he has the data. I'm going to give a little bit of the European perspective here, which actually is in some ways the reason we are still having this conversation globally, because telcos, European telcos, and a small number of them really started this conversation. I'll focus on predominantly 4 points. So one of the key arguments that we have been hearing in Europe is the fact that this idea of network fees is necessary because it is required to finance the increasing demands over infrastructure in Europe. And of course, we all know that the internet's infrastructure is not just limited to access networks, because actually the internet is not really a monolith, and it consists of many different players that are invested heavily in order to make sure that this infrastructure expands and is able to meet the demands of users. As I said in the beginning, this is really not new. We have been having this conversation for 15 years at least, and for 15 years we have been having reports suggesting that actually the internet model of traffic exchange is responsible for producing lower prices, promoting efficiency and innovation, and attracting investment that is necessary to keep up pace with the demand. So over the years, of course, and because the internet has changed and because the demands of users have also changed, we have seen this increasing number of new players entering the infrastructure to facilitate the higher demands of traffic. You have content delivery networks, you have cloud providers, you even have community networks, satellite networks, data center, edge nodes, and content caches are just a few of the new infrastructures that have developed to support internet communications. So the reality is that there is really not just one way to finance infrastructure, and I think that it would be really naive to believe that. However, telcos are fixated in just one way. Direct payouts, give us money, and we promise that we are going to address your infrastructure's needs. The second point that I want to raise is really about what KS was also talking about, this idea of network neutrality and what such a system could do to this very basic yet fundamental principle that exists in the internet. So we all know that the internet is a network of interconnected networks. When data moves from point A to point B, it is routed through these networks, and now different companies own and manage different parts of the network. So the fact of the matter is that, ISPs are really the gatekeepers to the content users pay to access. And ISPs have a lot of power, if you think about it, at their disposal. They can mess up with traffic, they can degrade your traffic, they can change your quality, they can do a bunch of different things. So the idea of network neutrality is that they're not allowed to do that. And we need to make sure that this continues to happen, because if we give them any indication that the rules are a little bit flexible, they will be able to mess up with the way traffic is delivered and the experience that users end up having. So imagine an environment where telecom operators are able to negotiate deals for infrastructure development with certain companies within the internet's value chain. So logic dictates here that there must be some sort of a trade-off. We cannot expect money just to be handed out to telcos from Google or any other big company. So the possibility is, and that could happen, that a telco may end up prioritizing traffic or allowing content from certain companies, and that is a real issue. The other thing that needs to be pointed out, especially in the context of Europe, is that no one has ever proven that there was ever a market failure. Literally. I mean, there have been studies after studies after studies that actually say it is the contrary. There is no market failure in Europe. And when we have been asking for evidence that, why do we need this change in order to be able and support a market, we have not been getting that evidence. So, and this now is on top of a global pandemic where we saw a massive increase in traffic, right? If there was ever a period in time where we could have had market failure, that would be during that 1 year in Europe when we were all locked up in our houses and the only thing that we're doing was accessing the internet. So another point, moving money from one private actor to another is really not a good idea. It's actually a pretty lazy idea, if you think about it. So the internet is made up of independent networks, and each network joining the internet is responsible for their own policies, their maintenance, and upgrades. Any proposal now that suggests a forced subsidy from one part of the internet's value chain to another through undue regulatory intervention risks distorting competition and change to the way the internet works. So the European Commission, that is really fixated in this, should really focus more on incentivizing investment in innovation rather than trying to transform the way those networks interconnect. And the last point that I want to make, and I will just wrap up, is that I find it very ironic that in Europe we are talking a lot about competition and the fears of market concentration. And here, we should be asking ourselves how sustainable really is a model where big technology companies will be paying off telcos. And I have been asking that question. I mean, how long do we think this is going to be happening if it goes through? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? When is going to be the point before big technology companies say, you know what, I don't want to pay anymore. I'm just going to start providing my own, become an ISP and start providing my own internet access. And then you really talk about internet concentration. Market concentration, sorry. Before closing, right now in Europe, we are at a place where we sort of phased off discussing network fees, but we are entering a place where we're discussing dispute resolution mechanisms. So we're not using the term network fees, but we're really talking about other ways in order to make sure that this money flows from one private actor to another. And we're even discussing perhaps reopening again the conversations around the open internet regulation, which is affect the network neutrality conversations. Let me make something very clear. A dispute resolution mechanism is a backdoor to network fees. It is exactly the same. The idea is, again, not new. It has been borrowed from the publishers, and it was, we saw it happening in the context of in Australia and in France, where some deals have been made between big technology companies and publishers. The things that, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of visibility in how that works, simply because those agreements are covered by NDAs, so they're not transparent. And the only thing we know, however, is that they don't cover smaller publishers. These are literally deals between huge publishers and technology companies. So again, we need to rethink what we want to create. If it is literally about innovation and investment and ensuring that infrastructure develops, this is really not the way to do it. And happy to discuss further.
Thank you, Constantino. And that reminds two big gaps in the network fees mechanism. The first one is, if you transfer funds from the private sector to another private sector, you cannot make sure that that funds will be used for connectivity, for connecting the unconnected, or innovation. Basically, you're just transferred from the same sector one place to another. You don't pass through the government. You don't even have this. And the second one is transparency. If you increase the need to have private contracts, you can have NDAs and you can have less transparency on how these costs are shared and how this is impacting the internet. So, Claudia, we go online to you. Welcome.
Okay. Regarding this discussion, I want to address first the net neutrality as a principle. In Latin America, many countries have adopted net neutrality in their laws. For instance, in Colombia, since 12 years ago, net neutrality is applied in Colombia. For that reason, we need to have an open internet without discrimination related to type of traffic or company or any sector. I think this helps to foster innovation and to continue evolution of the ecosystem. When we talk about network fees or fair share, it's a discussion that is brought to the table mainly by the telecom operators who control the access networks, and they indicate that there are huge investments needed in the years forward, and they need that all parts in the ecosystem contribute to the sustainability. From the regulator perspective, we need first to identify if there is a problem, if there is a market failure. For the reason in Colombia, at the end of the last year, we opened a consultation to all the stakeholders, but not focus on fair share specifically, but in the whole ecosystem to understand better in Colombia how is the functioning between access networks, content networks, and all of the agents of the value chain of internet for mobile and for fixed telecom networks. In that consult, we asked for information about traffic evolution, ARPUs, infrastructure provided by the different actors, the content access providers and the telecom. And we are gathering this information to have a real diagnosis of what's happening here. Because as we heard before, the Europe and the South Korea approaches are very different, and we cannot only bring that experience directly to the Latin region. We need to understand what is happening in Latin America, having in mind that we have multinational companies also working here. In the first analysis that the CRC has been taken, we saw a growth of the traffic in 1.7 times in the last 2 years. We think this is a normal growth. There is no exponential growth of the traffic that in sometimes was mentioned by some actors. And we think this could be due to two main aspects. One of them is the distribution that has been made for the content. We have more CDNs and caching installed inside our country, and this helps to have the local or domestic traffic instead of overseas. And the other is the technical advances made in compression. Some content providers have been working on that, and in Latam region, we have news about agreements between big tech companies and big ISPs in different countries like Mexico, for instance. This will help to lower the need for traffic for networks, lower the pressure for the network that is handling that traffic. Of course, we understand that there's a great pressure for investment and for connecting users. We have now a lot of users that has not been reached by any network at the moment. We have a connectivity gap in Colombia and in different regions. And as a strategy and as a public policy, we need to address that. In that aspect, different discussions has been taken. For instance, to have more actors, more stakeholders contributing to universal service funds, to have more resources to address this connectivity gap. This is a topic that has been discussed by many policy government agencies around the region, and it's a way to have more services, more reach of the services for the users. But at this moment, we don't think there is a specific solution for this discussion that has been taken mainly in the last 2 years for Latin region. We know BEREC, like Constantino said before, has more years discussing this, and we know, we have studied their experiences about the conclusions of the functioning of the IP interconnection and how the peering and the agreements are still working for the European context. We hope to have the results of our analysis related to this open consultation of the internet ecosystem in Colombia in the next month. And also we have a new legal aspect to review, because our constitutional court recently took a decision about our net neutrality law. And maybe as a regulator, we need to make a review of the current regulatory framework related to net neutrality, and because the Constitutional Court considers that offers differentiated plans to the users with specific applications or contents chosen by the ISP, not by the user directly. It's against the neutrality principles. For that reason, we will have to study that decision when it's fully published in the coming month, and maybe we have in the next year an updated regulatory framework for the neutrality and for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Claudia. It's very interesting that the results of the consultations are coming in the next month. Brazil has done a consultation twice. We have evaluated all contributions and split from those supporting network fees and rejecting network fees. Basically, big telcos are one side, the others are in the others, which reinforces an Internet Society report from 2 years ago that I think was named Telcos versus the World. So, Tatiana, please feel free.
Thank you very, very much. And I just want to start with a very brief reflection that these debates are developing and there are some shifts. As Constantinos said, there is not one way to finance the infrastructure development. And there are certainly various and very creative ways on how big telcos push this idea of network fees through. So what initially started as the infrastructure investment debate or underinvestment debate, we see it moving into different aspects, such as, for example, network sustainability, or what Konstantinos mentioned already in the EU. There is currently a discussion about the so-called dispute settlement mechanism for the interconnection market, which is basically a backdoor. In Latin America, we're also witnessing various debates and discussions about regulating platforms through quality standards, which again is a backdoor to network fees. And what does it show? To us, it showed that it is not about these initial concerns about the lack of infrastructure investments. So far, we don't see any indication that there is a problem that needs to be solved with the network fees or fair share. As I said at the beginning, in fact, it's like a solution. Various solutions have been proposed in search for a problem. It is my understanding, of course, we'll look forward to see the outcomes of the consultation in Colombia, but various debates in Latin America found no market failure. The consultations in the European Union also failed to provide any evidence of a problem that needs any regulatory interventions like that. And even more, the European body of regulators for electronic communication, BEREC, already mentioned here, has concluded that Internet's interconnection ecosystem is a well-functioning market. It has very good dynamics with very balanced bargaining powers, and BEREC also said that the introduction of these cost-sharing mechanisms would in fact have very negative consequences on the Internet ecosystems. So it's basically all about the telecom operators generating revenues and wanting some easy solutions to get more. And to us, the reference to content providers being traffic generators is the flawed premise that BEREC has already debunked, at least in the EU. Following these developments and following these narratives in the EU, in Latin America, and also in South Korea, basically lets us witnessing how the big telecom operators are trying to break the net neutrality frameworks. And they're even saying it openly, that hello, hey, this is the time to review the net neutrality. And as I said already, the premise that content providers or platforms are traffic generators, that they generate the traffic, is fundamentally flawed. The traffic is not created by the online services. It is requested by Internet users. It is this traffic that those very users already pay for in their Internet subscription, and just as online service pays for their own Internet access to send it. So to put it simple, there is no service free riding on the Internet, because data access and fees already been paid. They already been factors at the cost. And in addition to telecom operators, for example, content generators have their own investments. I'm pretty sure Netflix could tell us how much they invest in this content creation. It's also millions. So from our perspective, any solutions that would introduce network fees would, first of all, disadvantage the smaller players by creating much higher entry barriers. They will risk fragmenting the Internet by conditioning this connectivity on prior contracting with the user's network. And ultimately, these costs are going to be passed on the end users, which contradicts that very principle of fairness that these proposals seem to be motivated by. But more importantly to us, to our mission, these solutions can fragment the open and globally connected Internet, because the current global connectivity is based on voluntary inter-networking agreements that allow network operators to optimize their connectivity to meet their customer needs. And this is basically a cornerstone for the Internet to be efficient network, resilient network that is able to host new applications, deploy these innovative services. And this happens without prior contracting with everyone in the system. And these arrangements foster innovation, they foster development. So how these network fees solutions will break the Internet? Simply speaking, and I'm really saying it simply, they can turn Internet, the idea of the Internet, into a telephone system. The same regulation. And again, talking about the development of this debate, as Fabro mentioned already, in Brazil there is a proposal to revoke the norm that clearly separates telecom services from value-added services as the Internet. And this distinction allowed Brazilian Internet to grow as decentralized, competitive ecosystem. We recently published an open letter for Brazilian lawmakers and regulators highlighting the threat that this proposal of separation creates, centralizing internet control, weakening market diversity, disrupting current governance model, which is based on public interest and multi-stakeholder input. So to sum up, if we stop treating the internet as technology neutral, general purpose network, we will just lose it. And we already witnessed the evidence, like, for example, when KC spoke about South Korea. And anecdotally also, but importantly for users and services, when you look at Korean markets, you see that teams playing big esports in Korea do not play from South Korea anymore. They move to other countries to avoid playing because of disadvantage in network latencies that are basically unbearable for their activity. And I know that for some regions it might be irrelevant, but in South Korea, it's a very big issue. And as I said before, the consultations in Latin America and the EU didn't find any market failures to justify such interventions in the traffic. And just to wrap up, if we continue these debates that connect the issue of investment to telecom infrastructure, to this flawed premise of traffic generators, we will always get nowhere. We will get stuck at best, and at worst we'll have fragmented internet. Exactly because the initial premise in this discussion is absolutely flawed. And in this context, any solution, if we think that, okay, maybe the investment in the infrastructure is a problem, but any solution that connects network infrastructure investment to traffic generator is not a proper solution, because it does not solve the root of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. And I think I can bring another topic to the table, which is freedom of expression. There is a big policy frameworks that we need a huge share of in the internet. The open and safe internet needs limits to be enforced, and then we need sheriffs. And network fees are not content neutral. They might imply on what is distributed and how. So let's say I have Netflix, a documentary in favor of myself, and I have a documentary against myself. If I can make a distinction on how both of them, each of them, reach the audience, there is a direct impact on freedom of expressions amongst others. So, Thomas, moving to you.
Yeah, I don't know if the documentary is for or against you, Fabro, so I haven't seen it yet, so maybe it will come soon. No, thanks. A lot has been said already, of course, so I'll try not to repeat what many of you have said. Maybe just to start looking at the evidence, good policy is always grounded on evidence. The discussion, of course, has been rebooted in the past 2 years, but it's not been years, it's been decades. We have decades of perspective on internet traffic growth. And in the past, let's say 25 years since the internet has gone really commercial and mainstream, traffic has probably grown 500 or 1,000 times. Is this out of control? Is the internet breaking? No, it's thriving. It's doing great because that growth is absolutely sustainable. And the reason for that is that it's managed really well in a collaborative manner by the stakeholders, many of which are in the room today. In the interconnection space, what does that mean? That means that content providers, such as Netflix, and ISPs, large or small, work together to make the traffic flow in an efficient manner. It's in both of our interests, because our joint consumers, our customers, consumers, want access to great content and are willing to pay for good quality broadband to access great content. So what does it mean in practice? Netflix has invested over $1 billion in its own content delivery network, OpenConnect. We have over 6,000 server locations around the world, which means that when you press play on Netflix, you're actually streaming from right around the corner. It means no, terabits of streaming over a long-distance network, no congestion of the long-distance backbone, and unhappy dogs in the Korean households thanks to that. And to be clear, it's not Netflix doing it on our own. It is working with ISPs to do it. It's literally engineers sitting down in the same room, drinking coffee, sometimes drinking beer, and figuring out network planning together. And so it's that joint work of the community that has achieved this effectively lack of a problem to solve. I think BEREC was mentioned so many times, but I just wrote it down because the quote is just so, I couldn't have written it better myself, to be honest. Network usage has increased, but due to continuous technological development, as well as competitive pressure, marginal network costs are observed to have declined to the point that they outweigh any increased costs associated with increasing network use. That's the graph Professor Park showed, like traffic going up and to the right all the time. Cost, flat, all the time. BEREC reiterates that the internet has, since it was created, managed to cope with traffic growth and more accentuated traffic peaks, all of which reflect changes in usage patterns as well as increased diffusion of internet access throughout societies. BEREC considers that due to competition as well as technological progress, there is currently no indication that this is likely to change in the future. Okay, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just addressing the net neutrality point, I think if we boil it down very simply from a consumer perspective, net neutrality is about paying for one single broadband access and being able to access any content of your choice, whether it's on Netflix, any other service. And network fees directly turn this principle upside down, because if there's a toll at the entrance of your ISP network, then you don't have the choice of the content. You can only access the content that has a special deal with your ISP. So the user is not in control anymore. The gatekeeper is in control. That's the fundamental contradiction. And by the way, in the entertainment world, we know exactly what it looks like when there's no such neutrality. It's called cable, and it sucks. That means that you're buying a cable broadband and you're subject to carriage disputes. Oh, the carriage provider don't get along. You don't have this channel or that channel. On the internet, it's simple. You pay for your broadband, you pay for your Netflix or your Disney or anything else, and you have the choice. I think it's a much better system. And so in our engineering discussions, between ISPs and content to figure out the servers and the interconnection, yes, there's one moment at the end of the meeting, you figured the plan out, you drank all the coffee, and there's, oh, by the way, my boss says you need to pay for this interconnection. And maybe the other side will be, well, we think maybe you should pay for the interconnection and access the content. Is that a good model? Yeah, no, that's not a good model. All right, let's move on. That's hardly a market failure. It's just the way the business is done. Now, I wanted to address, I think Claudia mentioned a lot of interesting points, right? I don't mean to say that everything is fine on the internet. There's no issue to resolve. I think, we're gathering at IGF every year because there are still very interesting questions to resolve. And I want to mention a few of them, right? Websites are still being throttled today, even including in developed nations. There's a net neutrality case in Germany happening at the moment. We still have unconnected people, billions of people around the world that are still not connected to the internet. And geopolitical risk is creating risk of splinternet. Those are the real issues, not the network fees, right? And so the good news is that there are existing good solutions that work for many of those problems. I'll mention some of them. The first one is the most obvious. First, do no harm, right? I'm often asked, like, well, yeah, but isn't there a compromise to be found in this fair share deal, right? Let me be crystal clear. If you are looking to solve a problem that does not exist, there's no compromise to be made. That's a fake. That's a solution in search of a problem, right? Now, on the supply side for connectivity, competition has been proven over and over and over again to be a great way to stimulate investment and stimulate affordability. Pro-competitive policies should be considered whenever they're helpful, of course. And then there's potentially a coverage gap that can be addressed through subsidies. I think even bigger is a demand gap. We were talking about Latin America. I'm always fascinated by the figures that GSMA releases for Latin America. I think there's over, I may be misquoting the numbers, but directionally, I think there's over 90% of people covered by 4G networks, and I think only around 60% adoption. That means people are covered by the network. However, either they choose or they cannot afford to actually subscribe. That is the adoption gap, and that is a demand gap. streaming services like Netflix contribute to demand, of course, to the internet. There's a causal link between the availability of video on demand and then broadband adoption of faster speed, willingness to pay, and consumer surplus. So that is a way to address the demand gap. Of course, that is not the only way, because as you well know, it's not just about entertainment on the internet. It's also about access to information, access to public, critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And so in terms of policies, right, I think if I want to quickly recap, and I know we need time for the questions as well, right? Discard the false good ideas, right? Do no harm. Move on from the debates of the past. Pro-competitive policy to stimulate the supply side, potentially targeted subsidies, but also pro-demand policies. And the demand, again, is generated by the content, by the availability of the online services. Nobody buys a broadband connection to see the little blinking lights on their router. Well, actually, maybe I do. I like to have a super fast fiber at home in Paris and see those lights blink really, really fast, but I don't think that's the majority of people. And so there's often this idea of, well, shouldn't we tax, the online companies to fund the infrastructure? That's looking at the problem exactly backwards, because you're going to compress the demand by taxing the demand for the thing you actually want to stimulate adoption of in the first place. That's not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So now we have 13 minutes. By the end of it, they cut my mic. So we need around 10 minutes for the table to reply to your question. So we have 3 minutes for collecting questions. We can start here. Please be aware of the person next to you.
Thank you very much, and much appreciated for facilitating this very important discussion. My name is Luvo Gray. I am from the South African Internet Governance Forum, and I run an internet service provider in South Africa. So given Africa's urgent need to expand, affordable internet access to over 1 billion unconnected people, how do we then ensure that the global network fee models do not create new financial barriers for African-owned networks, content creators, and also users trying to participate meaningfully in the digital economy? Because I think one of the discussions we are not having is that traditionally, right, the undersea cables were owned by your Dutch telecoms, which are consortiums of telecommunications companies, right? Now, and most of those cables have reached end of life, are now reaching end of life. And the new generation of undersea cable owners are the very same content creators we're trying to influence, the telcos want to introduce network fees for. So if the fees are increased, aren't we worried that the international transit will also increase, and therefore cause problems for internet service providers like ourselves trying to connect the next billion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go for the next one on site.
Hello, my name is Rian Duarte. I'm from the Brazilian Association of Internet Service Providers. We have been an active voice against network fees in Brazil. We represent small ISPs and small and medium operators in Brazil that, as you may know, Brazil has a rich and ISP system with over 20,000 small and medium companies holding over 60% of fixed broadband market share. Unfortunately, has been shown by the panel, our regulator continues to hold debates on this topic, even though big telcos have not been able to produce concrete evidence of a problem to be solved. But on the other hand, we are happy to see a push against network fees from our parliament, with law proposals prohibiting this practice, and we would urge other countries to follow suit. And my question is a very simple one. What else is there to be done to overcome this debate so we can focus on actual solutions for connectivity?
Thank you very much. We go for the last question.
Yes, I'm Frode Schieling from Telco, 200 million customers in Asia and in Nordic. I'm surprised about the panel here. We have just one side presented here, one view. So next time I suggest to get we'll talk about the challenges that the telcos and the ISPs see. Because the fundamental principle in internet was that there was an equal share of traffic. I send as much traffic as I receive from you. And that was the founding principle. Today, it's about maybe 70-80% of the traffic I've seen in some of operations. It comes from a few handful big CDNs, Netflix, Google, and some others. So it's very unbalanced. But the thing here is the revenues for the telcos is sinking. And that is the perceived challenge that the telcos experience. And we see the revenues created on the content providers, like Netflix, is going straight up. But the infrastructure need to be paid for. And there are three ways to do this. You can have network fees, or you can break the net neutrality to get some extra in revenues. And the third option is to lay all the cost on the customers. And that is an issue when you at the same time talk about the connected and unconnected. So what I hear from you, you want the customers to take all the cost. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, we have 9 minutes, so no time for new questions. Yeah, let's okay. Please go.
Thank you. My name is Pablo Barrionuevo from Telefónica. I think it would have been interesting to have a telecom operator seated in this table when talking about network fees. Sometimes the multi-stakeholder model is not so multi, I see. In my opinion, we may agree that we have a problem. There is a problem. And the problem is the sustainability of the model. And of course, it is always interesting to talk, to try to find solutions to the problems we have. But sincerely, I'm not sure that what has happened here today can be considered a dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we want to go for concluding remarks.
I'll answer one question. I mean, I've read a lot on the principles of the internet, but I've never heard about equal share of traffic. I mean, the ISPs don't. I mean, there's no cost differential whether traffic is going one way or the other. I mean, there is no increase in cost. So I don't know why you think that there has to be on any road. Why should the data travel? Equal amount of data should travel both ways.
I can comment on this one. The point about traffic ratios, I think is important to be addressed because it's part also of the history of transit and interconnection negotiations. I think historically, internet traffic has been routed on a hot potato basis. That means that if you have, let's say, a French network and an American network interconnecting on both sides of the Atlantic, if you're the net sender, you're dropping, let's say the French is the net sender, you're dropping the traffic to the American network in Paris, and the American network has to carry it long distance. And vice versa, if you're sending from the US, the French has to carry it long distance. So there used to be on multi-location interconnect, hot potato routing, a benefit to being a net sender and a disadvantage to being a net receiver. That's why oftentimes on long-distance networks, you have ratio settlements agreements, and I think that's fine. As you said, it's okay to have those agreements. That's why, it's a well-functioning market because you have deals that reflect the underlying economics. However, the modern internet does not function like that, certainly not for content delivery. What we do with Open Connect, for example, is the opposite of hot potato routing. It is actually the equivalent of cold potato routing, meaning that we bring the traffic all the way next to the user to those 6,000 Open Connect locations around the world. And so when you're on a cold potato routing, whether the traffic flows in and out locally to Oslo does not make a difference. And this is why for such agreements typically between CDNs and operators, there's no ratio concerns, and they're just the bits flow freely on a settlement-free basis. But to your point, long distance, backbone network, tier 1 networks, they typically would enforce ratio agreements. But if it comes from a terminating ISP, wanting to charge CDNs on the basis of ratio, then you almost always know that this is a fake argument and more like a network fee type of, hey, I want to exploit my termination monopoly and violate net neutrality doing it.
Thank you. So we have Claudia online. We go to Costas and then to Claudia.
just very quickly, and Thomas just literally talked about, and KS responded to the traffic question. One of the things that really surprises me in this conversation is, especially when I hear about the traffic, is that we're talking, yes, there is a change in traffic, but then no one continues to say, oh, but, you know, some companies have actually built data centers and content delivery networks to ensure that actually, you know, this traffic does not become burdensome for ISPs. And the other point, we are literally, both in Europe and in Brazil, we are hearing small ISPs telling large telco operators that they don't want this, that this system is going to disadvantage them. And we continue to beat the same drum. There are 5 companies in Europe that continue to beat the same drum, saying, oh my God, but yes, we used to be so big, and right now we're not as big as other companies. Well, I'm sorry, they had 20 years to invest. They had 20 years to innovate, and we have not seen that. Literally, we have not seen that. And I still cannot understand why we need to be excusing the lack of innovation and start moving money around just because we have telcos being extremely unhappy with not being as big as they used to be.
Thank you, Kostas. Claudia, online?
Yes. Regarding the questions, I want to address first that the sustainability issues that the telco operator has can be addressed in different ways. In the different spaces that we share with them here in Latam region, they indicate that there are different ways that could help them to grow the networks and to have better solutions for the users. For instance, reducing spectrum licensing fees, reducing the taxes that they are being charged by different laws, and reducing or adjusting the obligations for specific coverage in far and difficult access regions. Those are measures that the government could take to help them grow and to have more focused services and investments in the region. For the reason there is no one specific answer to the discussion that we are having with them. Another thing that I would like to mention is that the regulatory framework need to be more flexible, more innovation-driven. For that reason, we have been working in things like the regulatory sandboxes, and we are open to receive innovation proposals from the telco operators and TV providers with new projects that they could develop in an experimental way that need flexibilization of some specific regulations in place. In that context, we could help them and to develop new services, new process, to have a better quality of service and adjust and change our regulatory framework if it's needed. For that reason, I think as a government institution, we need to have these kind of spaces and explore different approaches to help the ecosystem growth. And I think the discussion is not only for one specific solution, but have different ways. And of course, multinational and multilateral cooperation in forums like Regulatel, for instance, that is our LATAM Forum for Regulators, could help us to find these different approaches.
We have 5 seconds. Thank you very much for the participation. Sorry, Tatiana.
It's fine.